Welcome to Daily Steps from One Extraordinary Marriage, where we outline simple steps that you can take to have the ultimate marriage adventure. I'm Tony DeLorenzo, your co-host, along with my beautiful wife, Elisa. In today's show, we answer the question, what can I do if my husband yells at me in front of our child?
Let's first talk about when people yell, right? Because people yell when they're frustrated. People yell when they feel helpless or maybe they feel threatened. And people also yell if that was the only model that they saw growing up, right? Yeah. These are all things to consider. And, the reality is that there's a difference between having an argument and yelling at someone. Because the argument generally, now I know sometimes they get heated. I mean, they've been heated in our household too, is we're trying to have an exchange of ideas. We're trying to share information and maybe we're not doing it effectively, but ultimately that's what we're trying to accomplish. When you're yelling at someone, it generally falls into the category of demeaning them, belittling them, trying to win a point, have power over them. And
I would even say and use coarse words.
Oh, sure.
When we're dealing with yelling, there is much anger and rage that's coming behind it, where in an argument, there can be elevated sound and it could be loud. And yet, like Elisa said, it's an exchange of ideas and we're not able to get them through.
And it's important to know the difference.
It truly is.
And maybe the words that we're using, you need to tweak those for your marriage, right? Because you see things a little bit differently. But I just want to give you this framework of what it can look like with argument versus yelling, right? And so to answer this question on the surface, you say, well, have a conversation with your husband when things have calmed down and just try and talk through the situation, right? How can we as a team, because ultimately in marriage, we get behind these microphones every day because we want to equip you with different steps for the two of you to become a team. How can we handle this situation differently? What was going on, honey, that you felt the need to yell at me? Right? Just what was that dynamic?
And here's the thing. I'm going to say this really quick, though, too. If you're in a place where if you feel threatened to have such a conversation, then you need somebody in between to have these conversations. You need a counselor, you need a therapist, you need a pastor maybe, or somebody in your church community who can sit with you guys and talk this through and discuss it. And not just one time, because it's not going to fix itself with one conversation with a counselor or a therapist. So please make sure that you are safe. That's number one. Do not put yourself in a situation where there's going to be more belittling, more demands put upon you, where you feel that you're threatened. That is not acceptable, period. And I do not put up with that at all. Somebody tells me that there is verbal abuse happening in their marriage, then it's time to say, until you can get yourself fixed and worked on, I need to make sure that I'm protected.
Because, there are a couple different scenarios that can play out when you attempt to have this conversation with your spouse. One is that the yelling was kind of a one-off thing, which, we've had it in our marriage, and your spouse is open to the conversation. There was stuff going on, and the two of you have discussed it, and change can be made. And just as a side note, it's often best if the two of you are going to disagree about parenting stuff for the two of you to have a conversation, not in front of your child.
Correct.
Right. Not that children shouldn't see arguments, but if it's specifically if it's a parenting thing, be a unified front in front of your kids. And then the two of you figure out how you want to handle things behind closed doors. Now, if your spouse isn't open to having those conversations to say, how can we handle things differently? If you find yourself in a situation where this isn't a one-off experience, but this is happening over and over again, and you're in a place where you feel like you're walking, the phrase that I most often hear from individuals when I'm coaching them is walking on eggshells, afraid of what I'm going to say. I don't know what he or she is going to be like when they come home. You're in a situation that has crossed the line into an abusive situation. It may be emotionally abusive, it may be verbally abusive, it may be physically abusive. But you're in a situation that needs help.
Yes.
And here's how I know that it needs help. Because I know, if this is the scenario that you're in, I know that you've tried to fix it yourself. I know that you've tried to say the right thing. I know that you've tried to do the right things and you're still getting yelled at. Those are telltale signs of abuse. And it's time for the two of you to get help, either individually and or as a couple. Because a situation like this becomes combustible. It becomes a situation that will only get worse unless there is an intervention. Unless there are very drastic steps that are taken to interrupt the cycles that the two of you are in. It's not well, I'm just gonna try a little harder. I'm just gonna pray a little harder. I'm just gonna make the right meals or say the right things. Guys, we're human. We're gonna make mistakes. And we were never designed in marriage to be persecuted for every mistake that we make, be it if it happens in front of your kids or it doesn't. But don't wait to take action on this. If you're listening to this show and this is resonating with you and you're thinking, this might be me, then it's time to get help. So if this is a situation that you're dealing with in your marriage, please check out oneextraordinarymarriage.com/169.